This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protest. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about. But what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
On the 20th of September 2019, Friday Java from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Across the world today, people are marching for climate change, to address the climate crisis. Greta Thunberg, I'll get her name right in a minute, I have to look at it. Anyway, nonetheless, she is in New York, and in New York, the public schools have granted students an excused absence from classes today to March, and hundreds of thousands will be marching in New York City and across the 50 continuous states in the U.S., from small towns to cities like New York. In Australia, they have already marched hundreds of thousands of people from Sydney to Melbourne to various other cities throughout Australia. They have answered the call there, and these are teenagers, youth are marching. Greta Thunberg, when she started her march, or her protest, she was in front of the parliament in Sweden, and she was there alone, but she had an idea of how to ignite a movement. Very few social movements have been ignited by one person. Many times it's a collective of people. An example, of course, was the Montgomery March in Selma, Alabama, and a group of people there, including Rosa Parks and many others, had been planning that march for many years. They tried it before. She sat down on the bus, and then they decided a young minister from Atlanta, Georgia, named Martin Luther King Jr. would lead the march, and he did in fact lead the march under much criticism. Most people don't understand that, but Dr. King was criticized by the right wing, of course. The FBI tried to hinder him, sabotage his life, tried to drive him to jump out of windows, sent various types of information to his wife to break up his family, etc. But Dr. King continued on. But Greta Thunberg is different. She was only 16 years old. She's 16 now. I assume she was probably 15 when she started this as a single individual. But by setting out there, she was able to activate social media, something that Dr. King did not have at the time. He and the Southern Leadership Conference was at the mercy of corporate media, which found that it was in their best interest to project Dr. King on the 6 o'clock news. So therefore, he was projected. The newspapers wrote about that struggle because it was in the South to begin with, was not in the North. When he went into Joliet and in the Chicago campaigns, things turned, and particularly when Dr. King went to the Riverside Church in New York and denounced the war in Vietnam. Now, at that day, this was equivalent to what Greta is doing now worldwide. Greta came to the U.S. from Sweden on a boat, quite literally, and it wasn't the Mayflower. This was a boat powered by solar energy. She made it here, and she is now here, and she is organizing people what you have to do. And it's very, very difficult to take on young school people in their teens. I heard on the radio, the BBC, a young lady, 13 years old, in Philadelphia. So most of these people will be in their early teens that will be out there, whether they be in Philadelphia, in Moline, Illinois, San Francisco, Bakersfield, various other places in between, Missoula, Montana, Helena, Golden, Colorado. It's outside of Denver, and various other places, New Orleans, Austin, Texas, Lutenbach, Texas, Dallas, Texas, in Louisiana, in places even like Jackson, Mississippi, and various other places that you would not think of, where there will be a smaller group of people, but nonetheless they will be in solidarity. Now, if you cannot make one of these marches, just simply retweet one of Greta's tweets as someone that's in the movement, as we'll call it. That's what Dr. Kingdom used to call it, and Andy Young, and I hope Andy Young is able to participate also down in Atlanta, Georgia, in this particular situation, and also the students involved in the guns battle. We'll have some information on what coat they an arms maker in Connecticut. They are now no longer manufacturing the AR-15s. We'll talk about that. And we have our friends, I hope, and not foes, from the University of Virginia, and as we normally do, we pay homage to Heber, who was killed by white supremacists literally in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the University of Virginia, and the crystal ball, which we'll be getting to in a minute here. And I believe we had E.J. Leon. If we don't get him today, we'll get him tomorrow. And on the week that was, incidentally, we'll have the week that was. We'll be devoting special coverage this weekend to the Climate Crisis March, and we'll get some material up for that. We're kind of running behind because we have many, many things here in the production floor, so to speak. We have the warehousing of homeless. That was a proposal this week by DJ Trump. We'll talk about that more of that tomorrow. That warehousing situation. We still have to do President Mugabe's funeral, which was last weekend. We're kind of behind on that. We'll have an update on the Federal Reserve's action. They decreased the interest rates by 25 basis points. So now that rate is between 1.75 and a 2 of 1.75 basis points and 2%. That is the overnight rate there. So let's move on here and we'll get to the crystal ball. They are talking today about the Electoral College expanding the map. And this is by Kyle Klondike. He's the managing editor of the Crystal Ball. The Electoral College expanding the map. Trump is a small underdog in all of the Clinton states, but trying to play offense is wise. Well, everyone plays offense. We don't really think Trump can win New Mexico, where he campaigned early this week. Well, that's a tactic there. But he's wise to try to expand the map. Well, he's not really expanding the map. DJ Trump has been working on his base, which he's very wise to do. These are key takeaways, incidentally. While presidents who lose re-election historically don't win states, they didn't carry in their earlier victories. Presidents who win re-election typically do end up winning one or more states they lost previously, although there is one significant recent exception. However, the president seems to be at least a small underdog in every state won by Hillary Rodham Clinton. We are moving New Hampshire from a toss-up to lean Democrat in our electoral rating. It was a toss-up. Now they say that it's lean Democrat there. And the reason they give for that, DJ Trump consistently has been under the water in New Hampshire. President Trump was in New Mexico. He's also in California. A state he has no chance of winning. Early this week, in service of what seems to be like a mission, atomic mission, flipping the land of enchantment from blue to red, New Mexico voted for Hillary Clinton by about 8 points in 2016. The state voted for Barack Obama by 10 points earlier, a slight shift to the right that mirrored Obama's 4-point national popular vote victory, falling to a 2-point margin in favor of Clinton. In other words, New Mexico didn't show any particular strong trends towards Republicans in 2016. Nothing in the 2018 results when Democrats swept the state, federal, and statewide races, suggesting otherwise. One wild card, and that was a Libertarian, Gary Johnson, attracted a significant share of votes. That's his home state. That was in 2016, 9% of the vote there. Senate contest in 18, 15%. A sizable block of voters. Republicans' hopes will significantly break towards them without Johnson on the ballot. Still, New Mexico also has a larger percentage of Latino voters of any state. A group that is, as a whole, is considerably more Democratic than non-Latino European voters. They use white, we use Europeans. Clinton also won 48% of the vote in New Mexico in 2016, meaning that Trump, who got 40%, likely would have to convert the lion's share of Johnson's vote to his side in 2020 in order to win the state. In 2018, Senator Martin Hemrick was re-elected with 54% of the vote, meaning that even if all of Johnson's votes had voted for the GOP nominee, Hemrick would, would still have won comfortably. We rate New Mexico as a likely Democrat for 2020's general election. It's a presidential election at the early junction. Not a slam dunk, but a true swing state. Iowa, not in our judgment. This is the crystal ball. I would comment on New Mexico. New Mexico has been trending to the Democratic Party for a very, very long time. Remember, Trump was outraised by Clinton, but this time around, he may very well enjoy a resource advantage, which an incumbent president normally does, and therefore he could afford to pump more money into non-essential states than last time, even if he is ultimately bluffing in New Mexico. You'll see a lot of bluffing going on. Now, 3 other Clinton states are Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Nevada. Nevada being the land of Harry Reid. They were significantly closer than New Mexico. All were decided by 2.5 or less, where Trump likely will make a significant effort. Don't necessarily assume he can win one or more Clinton-won states, even as we see him as an underdog in all of them. And we'll get to that in a minute here. Overall, if Trump loses re-election, history suggests that he won't win any state in 2020 that he lost in 2016. But if he wins, he will very well may win one or more of the states he didn't win the last time around. And this is a little bit of the history here. Currently, the two-party presidential era, which dates back to 1856, when Republicans first produced a presidential nominee who was a main rival to the already existing Democrats. 6 incumbent Democrats have lost the presidential types have lost general elections for a second term after winning a first term. Previous election, that was Grover Cleveland, Benjamin Harris, William Howard Taft, who later ended up on the Supreme Court in 1912, Herbert Hoover, 1932, the Depression was coming, Jimmy Carter of Plains, Georgia, 1980, and George H.W. Bush in 1992. None of them carried any state they lost 4 years prior, and of course it makes intuitive sense. If a president goes from winning to losing, he is by definition losing ground. So all of these losing presidents lost states they had carried 4 years prior. In some instances, they lost quite a bit more. However, if Trump wins, history suggests he might win one or more states he didn't carry the last time around. Again, since 1856, there were 11 incumbent presidents elected to a second term after winning a first term in the previous election. This omits presidents like Theodore Roosevelt and Lyndon B. Johnson, who won elected terms in their own right after taking over for presidents who died in office, of course murder. Also, Cleveland, who won in 1884, lost in 1888, won again in 1892. These 11 were Abe Lincoln in 1864, Ulysses Grant in 1872, William McKinley in 1900, the racist Woodrow Wilson in 1916, Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. We're omitting his third and fourth terms for purpose of this discussion. The General Dwight Eisenhower in 1956, Tricky Dick in 1972, Ronald Reagan in 1984, Wild Bill Clinton in 1996, G.W. Bush in 2004, and of course Barack Obama being the last in 2012. Of the 11 re-elected presidents, 10 won at least one state. They failed to carry the first initial successful election. One exception is the most recently re-elected president, Barack Obama, who lost Indiana, North Carolina, and the single electoral vote contained in Nebraska's 2nd District after a somewhat surprising win there in 2008. He didn't add any new electoral votes to his coalition. That historic oddity makes more sense when one considers that Obama was the first president re-elected to a second term to lose ground in the popular vote share since Andrew Jackson, the hero of D.J. Trump. Again, omitting FDR, finally to re-election as Cleveland in 1892 victory after a 4-year hiatus. In other words, he was in and out. Interestingly, of these re-elected presidents, a majority, 7 of 11, lost one or more states they won in their first successful campaign. Obama, as mentioned, was one. The other was G.W. Bush was another. He picked up Iowa and New Mexico from the 4 prior years, but lost New Hampshire. In 1996, while Bill Clinton lost Colorado, Georgia, and Montana after winning them in 1992. Of course, in 1992, you had the late Ross Perot in the mix, but more than made up for those lost electoral votes. He flipped Arizona and Florida from the Republicans. So Arizona is winnable for the Democrats, at least it was in 1992. We are in an era with many landslide states in electoral college. We probably should expect a good amount of stability in the state level voting from 2016 to 2020. However, things can and will change. Obviously, if Trump loses, he will lose some states he won in 2016, and his intense focus on motivating his base or expanding it may make him an unlikely candidate to flip a Clinton state. If DJ wins, history suggests he might gain and lose ground. Hypothetically, it's not hard to imagine him, for instance, losing Michigan but winning New Hampshire. Very close to New Hampshire the last time around. These are also 2 close states in 16 and were decided by less than 4/10 of a percentage point. The Electoral College picture, we continue to see the 2020 weed as crystal ball as something of a 50-50 proposition. There are competing trends that argue both for and against the president's chances. On one hand, an incumbent president presiding over a time of relative peace and prosperity. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. They are trying to figure out a quote-unquote solution to the supposed Iranian attack on Saudi Arabia, which they have not proven. Another weapon of mass destruction caper. Nonetheless, the president does not have a top-tier challenger for the GOP nomination, not at this time. And the president's approval rating is considerably weaker and weaker, but enough to hold him up. It's about where Barack Obama's was at one time, in the low to mid-40s, formalizing that to some degree in our electoral college rating by making one slight adjustment. That's the granted state of New Hampshire. The Gallup poll, we'll get to that in a minute. Also, Trump's approval rating in New Hampshire at 35 and his disapproval at 58 most recently. The Morning Consult, we had them around here, rating 20 points underwater. The University of New Hampshire's granted state poll, he's at 42 and 53 there. The Gravis, that's a Republican, 10 points under at 44 and 54. We thought it would be more appropriate to list New Hampshire as leaning Democrat. Meanwhile, the state Senate race, it appears that the former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, is getting closer to entering the race. That is Gene Shaheen there. Lewandowski's nomination would certainly represent a double down on the Trump Republicanism. Anyway, that makes the overall electoral college rating evenly split at 248 with 42 electoral votes as toss-ups, and they rate Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, plus Nebraska's 2nd district. It's hard to say on Nebraska's 2nd district. That is around Lincoln area there, and I believe parts of Omaha. Now, Arizona is going to be a very interesting state. There's some Senate races there. And the last time around, who was it? Sinema flipped that seat there. We'll see what about the other Senate race. We at the Ouija board would say Arizona is more of a lean Democrat. Now, Pennsylvania, very interesting state there. Command and control state. Will Pennsylvania return to the fold, as they say, the Democratic fold, and quit the flummery out in western Pennsylvania? There, we'll see what happens there in Pennsylvania. A lot of turnout there. How will voter suppression affect Pennsylvania? Now, Wisconsin is a little bit different there. When Wisconsin's been moving back to more of a Democratic state, barely there. Evers, the governor there. Boss Walker retired finally. But there's still pockets in rural Nebraska, rural Wisconsin, where it's kind of up for grabs there. I guess one could say that is a toss-up, but we are feeling that it's more of a leaning Democrat than a toss-up. We might change that anyway. This also puts all Clinton's electoral votes at least the leaning Democrat column, but that doesn't mean the president shouldn't target some of them. Well, yeah, he'll target everything he can target. He's going to have a lot of money. And the book here, The Blue Wave, is out. That's the 2018 midterm election, the Blue Wave. The election and what they mean for 2020 is now available. That is from the University of Virginia. This is edited by the political director Sabato and the managing editor Carl Klondike. One of the things we've noticed here, and we were thinking about this, and Professor Amowitz is in there. His Time for Change model, very good model there, and some others here that are in the book. Theodore R. Johnson's next. Okay, there's some others here. One of the things the crystal ball needs to have is more input from the African American community. We made the same argument over at Nate Silver's shop. They finally did hire an African American. I don't check in there as much to see if they have someone in there, but overall, when you look at polls, make sure that African Americans and people, quote unquote, of color are well represented in those polls. Let's move on here. Where are we going to move to? We'll move to Real Clear Politics, wherever they are. And we'll go the latest polls here. And then we'll dive a little deeper, perhaps, into one or two of them. We'll look at it on Friday. First of all, we have a Fox News poll. That's approval rating. They have DJ Trump at 45 and 54. This is where he's been trending. And on Thursday, their national poll of Democratic nomination had Biden 11 points ahead. Biden at 28, Liz Warren at 16, Bernie at 18. Kind of an up and down there. Buttigieg at 5, Harris at 7, Beto O'Rourke at 4, Senator Booker at 3, Amy Klobuchar at 2, and the rest of the gang. In the state of New Jersey, Biden is running at 6 in Jersey, 6 ahead. He's at 26, Warren is at 20, Bernie Sanders, another statistical heap basically here at 18, and I'm surprised Senator Booker is running only at 9 in New Jersey. This is a Monmouth poll out of Long Branch, New Jersey. And Buttigieg at 6, Harris at 6. Looking for Beto. I don't see Beto there. Anyway, and now to a Fox News poll. This is a matchup between Joe Lunchbox Biden and Trump. He's up by 14 there. Bernie Sanders and Trump. Bernie's up by 8. Warren is up by 2. This is all on DJ Trump. Harris, Warren's up by 6, Harris is up by 2. The Gallup poll, very important here. DJ Trump is at 43, disapproval is at 54. The only poll he's been a little higher in has been the Rasmussen. He's at 49, and then Fox News shows DJ Trump way ahead of his opposition. Bill Ware at 2, Stanford at 2, and Walsh at 2, and him at 84. I wouldn't pay much attention to that particular situation there. And usually we do this, but we'll do it today. Well, we got a little time here. YouGov, Economist poll has Biden ahead. This is the Democratic race by 5. Here's Liz Warren at 21, and Bernie at 14, Buttigieg at 9, Harris at 6, Beto O'Rourke at 3, Amy Klobuchar at 1. Survey USA, the same, has Biden by 14, Warren at 19, and Bernie tied up at 17 statistically there. And Florida Atlantic, this is in the state of Florida. Biden is at 34, Warren is at 24, Bernie Sanders is at 14 in that poll. And this is Survey USA. The matches here, they're a little bit more charitable to DJ Trump. Biden is up by 8 in this Survey USA. Warren is up by 2. Bernie Sanders is up by 5. Bernie Sanders usually does better in these kinds of polls than Warren. Now, Florida Atlantic University has Trump up by 1. Warren and Trump tied. DJ Trump up by 1 over Bernie Sanders. Is up by 4 over Harris. And this is in the state of California. Now this is very interesting here. DJ Trump is down by 26. Warren is 18. Bernie 24. Statistically about the same. Bernie has been running better in California. Harris up by 18 in California. This is KGTV in California. And Beto O'Rourke by 17 over DJ Trump. And who else to chime in here? The Reuters poll at 43. The YouGov poll, this is DJ Trump's approval rating, at 44. Right direction, wrong track is up by 25. This is in Reuters. The Morning Consult, direction of the country, wrong track is up by 22. And the generic ballot from Politico, Morning Consult, Democrats by 7. YouGov, that is there, Democrats by 8. It's basically about the same. And the YouGov poll has DJ Trump at 89, Bill Ware at 3, and Terry Sanford at 2. You would kind of expect that to be going on about the way that it usually does go. Now let's see where we go. We'll go to the Washington Post, and we just do some headlines here, I guess. This whistleblower thing is a very interesting situation. This is evidently by some person from an intelligence service. They did not say which intelligence service. That was on the line with DJ Trump when he this is Ukrainian President-elect here, Zelensky. I don't know, 2.5 weeks ago before the complaint was filed, he spoke with Zelensky, and supposedly he promised him something, and somebody blew the whistle, quite literally. And the Democrats are trying to decide whether or not they will go to court. Here's the problem. This is another problem here. It's someone said, and Trump said, and the chances of us ever finding out the conversation, because national security is involved, are not great, period. So this is one of those things here. The administration retreated from transparency, which has often allowed adversaries to shape the narrative, etc. Anyway, that's neither here nor there on that. We won't find out very much. Another little article here is not one we'll cover today. From the border wall, officials consider diverting billions more in military funds. This is going to get a little bit tired here. In Canada, the brown-face, blackface scandal continues to haunt Justin Trudeau. The Canadians will have an election next month, period. We had something here by E.J. Dion. I'll have to find E.J. Anyway, the whistleblower involves Ukraine, it says. Some people familiar with it. Whistleblower complaint about Trump made by an intelligence officer centers on Ukraine. That's according to two people familiar with the matter, which set off a struggle between Congress and the executive branch. I'm reading from the Washington Post, Shane Harris, Greg Miller, etc. The people behind this complaint involves communication with a foreign leader and a promise that Trump made, which is so alarming that intelligence officer dropped the proverbial dime on him. 2.5 weeks before the complaint was filed, Trump spoke with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, former comedian. The calls on the investigation Democrats have launched earlier this month doesn't mean anything at all. This is one more of these adventures in darkness, so to speak. It's almost like Area 51, and evidently, later today, I won't forget that one, Area 51, there was a hoax put up on social media for people to descend on it. They're planning on descending on it. We'll report on that. Perhaps we'll have a special program. Our late partner, Jerry Pippin, that was his stock and trade. Area 51, UFOs, etc. So we go. What is old Ben Carlson expressed concern about big hairy men trying to infiltrate women's homeless shelters during an internal meeting, according to Free People. Well, that wouldn't be unusual right there. Carlson remarked, virtually shocked and upset many of the roughly 50 staffers who attended the meeting, causing a history of making dismissive comments about transgender people and who knows whom else, but that you could expect. Carlson addressed the proposal change using different terms in public, notably during congressional hearings, I suppose so. Answered the response to detailed accounts of his language in San Francisco, Washington. A senior official read a statement. The secretary does not use derogatory language to refer to transgender individuals. I doubt that very seriously, but anyway. There's a history of this out there, period. This involves bathrooms, etc. 3 HUD employees were contacted in San Francisco, interviewed by the Post, spoke on conditions of anonymity, said they feared retaliation, said Carlson, prefaced his remark about transgender by saying he believed in fairness and equality, but not special rights for any class of people. I don't doubt that. That wasn't the first time we heard him use derogatory language, one staff has said. Well, I mean, this administration has had a lot of derogatory things for transgender people, LGBTQ people, period. That is part of what they have been about, and they would like to change these rules. There's no doubt about that. In the remarks during confirmation, Carlson told Sherrod Brown that he would enforce laws related to equal access to housing for gays, lesbian, transgender people. So in other words, nothing new there. But this is an interesting development here. We've talked about guns and safety of the American people. The NRA has sponsored some kind of fantasy tale that American people are safe, running around telling American people to be safe in a country that they're not safe. But nonetheless, there are many, there's so many AR-15s in the U.S. consumers' hands that it makes no sense to produce more. That's what Colt Firearms Division said. And it's a firearm company that traces history back to 1830s. And Buffalo Bill, it's of course a popular gun amongst mass shooters. And there are so many weapons in the country that the market is saturated. Executives declared it's in good sense to follow consumer demand. The manufacturing president chief executive said, given this level of manufacturing of capability, we believe that there is an adequate supply of modern sporting rifles for the foreseeable future. The announcement comes at the trail end of a summer blackened by mass shootings. Virginia Beach, El Paso, Dayton, Ohio, and West Texas as Democratic candidates for president blast them. Beto O'Rourke basically said that. So Beto's argument is having some resonance. When we see that being used against children, he said, hell yes, we're going to take away AR-15s and your AK-47. Code has been a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment for 180 years. But 180 years ago, it wasn't much said about that. Walmart started selling AR-15s. You'll hear a lot of people say that, well, we are supporters of the Second Amendment. First of all, let's get one thing straight. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with the right to bear arms as portrayed in 2019. The Second Amendment provided for arming of militias, and they were talking about militias during the Revolutionary War. They were not talking about arming citizens. Check out the history of the amendment, folks, and you'll see that out there. Dick's Sporting Goods stopped selling assault-style weapons, and in March the retailer announced it would pull all guns and ammo off its shelf of nearly 20% of its stores. The National Rifle Association shooting illustrated last week foreshadowed Coach Schiff. Coach's vice president for commercial business told a publication that the company has seen a pretty sharp decline in sales, and this is they are portraying this as a market situation. There's no doubt. When Barack Obama came into the White House in 2009 during the Depression, there was a spike in gun sales because a false rumor was put out there that Barack Obama's administration would take away your guns, so they wanted your right to purchase guns. It was absolutely false, a lie, period. So people bought more guns than they would need in their lifetime. That is the story. And guns have not been selling well for the last few years. Now, the person, I believe it was in El Paso, bought a gun from a private sale. In other words, somebody made him a gun. Now, that's a different situation there, and it's a different situation when people buy guns at these gun markets where people can go there and buy guns. And we've also seen from a number of people, if we go to the murder of Mr. Castile in Minnesota, he had a permit to carry a gun. But that permit was not respected by the copper that murdered Mr. Castile. So in other words, there is a different situation involving African Americans and guns, period. So be warned. In fact, I have a person now that has a gun permit, and the police are on his case, and they tried to involve him in a shooting. They confiscated the gun, and he asked for his property back. They have already tested the gun for ballistic. It was not the gun used in the shooting spree, neighborhood operation, the worst kind. Anyway, nonetheless, his gun is confiscated. And at the same time, the police have his residency under surveillance. So they're following him around. This does happen sometimes. So that is where you are very, very problematic. And most criminal defense attorneys would advise you off the record that many times even getting a gun permit is risky in itself. And we know from experience in courtrooms that people that have weapons that are not registered, it depends obviously which state you're in, as to what severity of the crime itself may be less severe than having the permit and having the gun on you at all times. You will probably not get killed. Now in states like Texas, it's almost gotten to the point that you really don't need a gun permit, and there are states where you actually do not need a gun permit to carry a gun. So it depends on what state you're in and what the culture there is as to how you may end up. And one other little item here, this is from the Post. Over 3 million women in the U.S. say their first sexual experience was rape. Now that's kind of interesting. This is Kayla Epstein here. 3.3 million women's first experience was rape, as according to a new study of U.S. women 18 to 40, which also found that these incidents also associated with health effects. Latest published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that 6.5% of women in the U.S. are 1 in 16 experiences sexual intimidation that was forced or coerced. The average age was around 15. The women were less likely to be European college educated and more likely to have incomes below the poverty level and to have been born outside the U.S. than women who say their first encounter was voluntary, the data showed. The health implications were just as stark. The survey found that affected women were more likely to experience an unwanted first pregnancy and abortion and other reproductive issues compared with women who reported having a voluntary first effect. Endometriosis. Not sure what that is, but anyway, researchers used the data from 2011 to 2017 National Survey of Family Growth, including 13,000 women. The authors were able to expropriate bet an estimated 3,351,317 women 18 did not have a voluntary first encounter. It's quite alarming, said Laura Hawkes, as a researcher at the Cambridge Health Alliance, and the author of the study told NPR. Could you imagine that? The survey period ended in September of 2017, a month before the Me Too movement got off the ground. In a commentary on the study, Allison Hung of the University of California at San Francisco and Carolyn Gibson at the San Francisco Veterans Affairs Healthcare System, that's a mouthful, argue that the data was vital for a society moving to more comprehensive understanding of sexual assault. Gibson's a psychologist, was the different way in which women have been forced to submit. 46% of the women had a coerced sexual experience reported being held down during the incident, but even more reported experiencing verbal pressure, 56.4%, and coerced by a partner who was larger or older, 50%. Hawks comment on the lack of data on older women in this study. Hope that future research would not only get a more complete tally of women who had involuntary first experiences, but also help us better understand how this age group could be affected. We don't think of midlife or older women as sexual beings. We don't think about how sexual events can affect them, she said, but these issues are out there. And they are indeed out there, there's no doubt about that, and it is a productive situation that now these events are brought out here, and we're not going to be able to see the study. Anyway, let's do the numbers here of baseball scores from last night. Nonetheless, this is on the 19th of September. The Phillies were in Atlanta 5-4. In 11, the Mariners were in Pittsburgh, Mariners 6-5. The Giants were in Boston, Sox 5-4. The Padres were in Milwaukee, and the Brewers didn't drink too much beer, so it was 5-1 there. The Angels were in New York, Yankees 9-1. The Yankees got their Eastern title, the AL East, and they reached 100 wins. They're moving on. Toronto was in Camden Yards, Blue Jays 8-4. The Tigers were in Cleveland, and the Cleveland shut out the Tigers 7-0. The Cleveland had 11 hits, 1 error, and the Tigers 9 hits, no errors. And Mike Clevenger pitched 6 shutout endings. All right. And in 10, it's a game we tuned into. Cubbies went down. The Cardinals are 5-4 over the Cubbies. The Cardinals had 5 hits, no errors, and the Cubbies 6 hits and 1 error. Matt Carpenter homered in the 10th inning against Greg Kimball, as he's the closer for the Cubs, and couldn't get it closed. That game actually was a game the Cardinals were ahead, and the Cubbies came back, tied it up in the 9th, and in the 10th, the wheels fell off again. The Royals were in the Twin Cities, Kansas City. The Twins beat Kansas City 8-5. Cruz hit 2 of 4 homers by the Twins in 8-5 over the Royals. Nelson Cruz. Since he came from Seattle, he's been on a tear. There's no doubt about that. Let's look at the standings here. Hopefully we can look at those. In the American League East, I guess we'll start out with the Yankees that won that division. And next is Tampa Bay. They're 9.5 games back. In the Central, the Twins are on top. Cleveland is 4 games back. And Houston, they're at least in the big time here. And behind them is Oakland. They're 8 games back there. That's the American League West. In the National League West, Atlanta is in the playoff picture. And the Nationals 9.5 games back there. The Central of the National League, the Cardinals on top. The Brewers are 3 games back. The Cubbies have dropped to 4 games back. This thing will go down to the wire. The LA Dodgers have won their division. They have 98 wins, 55 losses. They are playing 641 ball. And their nearest competitor is the Arizona Diamondbacks. And they are 20 games back. The Giants are 24. Padres are 29. And the Rockies are 23. So that's what will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was tomorrow on Saturday. We also have a Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomics program coming up. We'll cover the Fed meeting and the speech by the Fed chair, Lawrence Powell, Jerome Powell. I'll get his name right in a minute. Almost as bad as DJ Trump. And we'll have hopefully E.J. Dion. We'll have Mr. Cook, Carl Rowe, and the whole gang will be around there, and hopefully some stories in between. And we'll talk more about the climate crisis march by these young people over the world. We came in here with Greta Thunberg, and we'll go out with our normal Friday Jobber and Madonna. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Saturday.
Where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people. Where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.